If you call something the last, then make it the last. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss X-Men: The Last Stand. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair, he is the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. It's Tim Williams. How are you, Tim?
I am wonderful, Laramy. Glad to be back with you on the Moving Panels podcast. It's always a pleasure.
And it's always great to have you here. And again, anybody's not listening to the 80s Flick Flashback podcast, why not? You should. 80s
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Great
with your
time
life?
for movies.
Right.
So we are talking about the third movie in the X-Men franchise, what is supposed to be the end of the X-Men trilogy. However, they kind of bring them back in Days of Future Past, so I don't know how much of an end this was, but whatever. But we're talking about X-Men: The Last Stand. It doesn't even get the name like X, like this. They called the second one X2.
Right.
They didn't even call this one X3 or X-Men 3. It's just X-Men: The Last Stand.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would proceed to just continue naming things X-Men, this title.
We don't like numbers in our titles.
Yeah, apparently not. But let's give a little background, because this one's actually got some really interesting background.
Okay, cool.
So Bryan Singer, who was the director of the first two movies, he left to direct Superman Returns. Don't know how great of a decision that was on his part, but he left to direct Superman Returns. Then they went through a bunch of different directors. Darren Aronofsky was actually offered the director chair. He declined. Joss Whedon, who actually wrote the comics that a lot of this is based on, this movie's based on, the Astonishing X-Men series back in 2004, he rejected it because at the time he was working on a script for a Wonder Woman movie.
Ah, very
You remember that when Joss Whedon was behind Wonder Woman?
I do. I remember, yeah. Well, I think so. I remember there being a rebooted TV show that didn't do anything. Was that him too? Or
no, that was not
else?
him. He was supposed to do the actual movie.
Gotcha.
And by the way, we're just going to go ahead and say right now, we are not going to talk about any of these guys' personal life.
No,
and
it's
how
very wise for us not to do
horrible
that.
of people they are. We're just going to stick to the movie. Zack Snyder was actually approached, but he was already committed to 300, so another comic book adaptation there.
Right.
Matthew Vaughn was then hired. He actually took the job back in March of 2005 with filming scheduled to start in July. So he was hired in March. Filming was set to begin in July. Unfortunately, though, he left due to family issues. I want to see his version of this. Now, of course, he would return, and he did X-Men First Class.
Right.
But I really would have liked to have seen him get the OG X-Men and seen what he would have done with that. But he left due to family issues, but there's also a quote I found that he said he thought he couldn't make the movie he wanted because Fox had such a tight schedule put on him. So they had already set the movie to be released in May of 2006. It was the beginning of May, then they moved it to Memorial Day weekend, and they weren't going to move it anymore. So even though he's starting in March of 2005, so a year later they're going to release the movie, that doesn't give him a lot of time as a director to actually do anything.
Right.
He pretty much just has to come in, use the script that they have, and go. So he left, and then they brought on Brett Ratner. He was hired in June. And again, let's remember, they started filming in July.
Yeah.
So they bring in Brett Ratner, who didn't really know anything about the X-Men. Surprise. There is a rumor, and I read this in a couple of different sources, that a production assistant or a writer or someone handed him the X-Men encyclopedia.
Okay.
They put out those like encyclopedias of all the different characters. They handed him the X-Men encyclopedia, and that is all he looked at to know how to deal with these characters.
Wow.
And yeah, and he read some of them wrong, which we're going to get into. The writers wanted to do the Phoenix Saga. They wanted to do the Phoenix Saga, and only the Phoenix Saga. Unfortunately, Fox wanted to do the Cure storyline, the mutant Cure. And so they merged them together and made it this movie. Of course, this was our X-Men, the same X-Men from 2000 that kind of kicked off the superhero boom of the 2000s. And, you know, this movie being released in 2006, it was right before the MCU got started, 2 years before the MCU got started. That was 2008. So kind of exciting there. So we have all of our original cast, and we'll get into some of that probably a bit later, but we do lose James Marsden very quickly. Cyclops is killed off screen, although we know he's killed, but very, very early. And that was due to the fact, remember I just talked about how Bryan Singer left to do Superman Returns. Well, people who forget, James Marsden is in Superman Returns.
Exactly. Yep.
So he left to do Superman Returns. Studio actually didn't want him in the movie at all.
Okay.
Fox just wanted him to be killed off, and it just kind of be mentioned that Cyclops had been killed. I don't know if they were going to do it the same way or if it was something else. I'm actually glad that we at least get to see it, as much as I don't like that they killed him, but whatever. We do not get to see Alan Cumming return as Nightcrawler.
Right.
And the reason for that is because Fox didn't want to pay for the makeup.
Exactly. Yep, I saw that.
How about that? They thought, well, it's going to be too small of a role, so he's not a main enough character. We're not going to pay for the makeup. Gambit was supposed to be in this movie, but they were also in the process of preparing X-Men Origins Wolverine at the same time, and they decided not to use him in this movie, and this is funny, because they thought there was too many characters and they wouldn't be able to do the character justice. How well did that work out for them?
Not well.
So let's get into the characters. Like you said, there are so many characters. We're not going to focus on the ones that are the main X-Men. We might mention them in passing, but you know, we can talk about them in other episodes. Let's kind of focus on the ones that are either introduced or highlighted in this. And I'm going to start with Warren Worthington.
Yeah. So
Warren Worthington, aka Angel, though he is never called Angel in the movie, but it does appear as Angel in the credits. Played by Ben Foster, who I think at this time it was kind of he was getting a big push in Hollywood right around this time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's one of my favorite actors, actually, who's very underrated and unappreciated, I think, because anything he's in, he's really good in it.
Yeah, I think he is what Shia LaBeouf tried to be, but Ben Foster couldn't reach the level that Shia LaBeouf did.
That is a very, very accurate statement.
Yeah.
Very accurate
Of course, he came before. He also came from Disney. I loved the sitcom he was in, the Fast Forward. But he's playing Angel. We see him at the very beginning. We get 2 flashback sequences at the beginning. One with Jean Grey, a young Jean Grey, getting picked up by the Professor and Magneto, which is something we're probably going to talk about a little bit more later. And then we see the young Warren cutting his wings off, which was a great scene.
Yeah. It was actually one of Matthew Vaughn's scenes that he had
that's definitely Matthew
planned
Vaughn.
for the movie.
Yeah, that's definitely.
So they said that was one of his one of the things he fought for that they actually kept in the script for this movie.
Again, and even the little kid that's playing Warren, I mean, it's a great performance. For just a small little part like that. But tell me if you didn't think that after seeing that he would have a bigger part in the movie.
You're absolutely correct. I was, I was very disappointed that there was not more of him in this movie, or at least there just wasn't enough of him in the movie for my taste.
He kind of just floats around in the background. You know, his dad tries to get him to be the first one to take the cure, which fits with the character, because in the comics, he actually is going to get cured, and it ends up being a ploy by Apocalypse, and that's how he becomes Archangel and becomes one of his horsemen, which we do see him as that character in Apocalypse a few years down the road, which again messes with the whole timeline thing.
Let's not try to tackle the timeline.
Look, I'm going to have a hard time when you talk about this movie, talking about that X-Men timeline that Fox just butchers. And it makes no sense, which again brings me back to that Jean Grey storyline. I was like, wait, how is Charles walking at this age, but he was already in a wheelchair in the 60s based off of, anyway, okay, moving on. But yeah, you would think Angel would have a bigger role. The character is an original X-Men. He was one of the original 5 X-Men in the very first issue back in 1963. So how you just make it so that you see him fight off, getting the cure, flying off. You see him in the mansion for a hot minute, and then he catches his dad. That's it.
Right.
That's what we
It's
get.
like he's there for just like it's almost a glorified cameo.
Yeah.
Even though he's not a character that we unless you're a comic book person would know the significance of his role, but he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't move the plot forward, and he's just there for like it's a writing device where it's like it's a convenient. That's the word. He's a convenient cameo. In other words, he's there for convenience. Like, let's show him early so that when we need someone to come and save us, something out of the blue that no one will expect. Oh, here's Angel. Remember that little kid that was cutting off his wings earlier? It's that guy. But that's going to put him in right here. It's like that's almost like they set him up just for that one moment, and that was it, or those 2 moments, I guess, with him getting refusing to take the cure.
Well, and then they kind of play it off like he gives the X-Men the motivation to keep going, because they have where he walks in while they're talking at the mansion, and yeah, but even that feels like, why did he have to be there for that? Like, I almost expected that it would be him who says, I don't know how this would have even fit, but for him to say, I'll pay off whatever, because, he's supposed to be rich.
Right. Yeah.
And so for him to say, I'll pay this off, or, I'll, just tell me whatever you need to keep this school going, or I don't know, but it's just, it was a complete waste of this character.
Yes, I agree.
But let's move on to a character that they did not waste, and that is Dr. Hank McCoy.
Yeah.
Beast.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's the thing. He was actually in all 3 movies. So if you go back to the first X-Men movie, it's a blink and you'll miss it thing when we're introduced to Logan in the bar. Hank McCoy is actually being interviewed on the TV, and it's of course not Kelsey Grammer, completely different actor. Then in X2, we get another kind of television interview, and we actually hear him talk. And again, it's not Kelsey Grammer. It's not even the guy from the first movie, but we get Dr. Hank McCoy. And then they finally, I have always talked about, I talk about this probably, more than I would probably think I do, but talking about how, back when we were younger, there was Wizard Magazine. And Wizard Magazine would always do if they made this into a movie, because that was before superhero movies were really a thing. So it's if they made this into a movie, who would play these characters? And of course, Patrick Stewart was always Professor X.
Right.
And so when they actually did cast Patrick Stewart as Professor X, all of us who grew up with Wizard Magazine and these comics just jumped for joy. Well, Kelsey Grammer was always somebody that they also paired up with Beast, because I think Kelsey Grammer was doing Cheers at the time.
Right.
Probably even Frasier had gotten started by that point. And so fans were looking at, hey, Kelsey Grammer could play Beast. And let me tell you, we were right. Kelsey Grammer could play Beast.
Which he really wanted the role too. Like he wanted it so bad he was willing to audition, and it was the first audition he had done in like 20 or 25 years, something like that. Like, he had to fight for the role, amazingly.
Well, it shouldn't have been a question. Of course, Beast is another original member appearing in the very first episode, although he didn't have he wasn't the whole blue Beast at that point. He was just more of like a really stocky looking guy who kind of moved around like almost like an ape. But yeah, the makeup looks great. This is, I
Yeah.
think,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
makeup they put on him looks great. I don't know how much of it was maybe CGI. I don't know if they did stuff like
I don't
that
think
back then.
no. I don't think they did. They did it more for First Class and Days of
Yeah,
Future Past for sure. But I think this was all pretty much makeup more so than green screen special effects stuff.
it was great. It was absolutely great. His movements, again, I know some of that
Hmm.
was CGI, especially during the battle at the end,
Oh yeah,
the way
yeah.
he moves, but even Kelsey himself, when he gets into certain poses and it was great. I even loved
Hmm.
when he puts on his uniform, he's like, it doesn't quite fit. It's like, I don't care. That looks great. Like the way the
Hmm.
jacket was kind of open and also pulled back a little bit. It's like, it looks great. There's nothing. And Beast was definitely needed for this.
Hmm.
Beast does hold the story well. He serves an important role, which he actually does in the comic as well, which we'll get into in the moving panel section. But yeah, absolutely love Kelsey Grammer as Beast.
Agree.
All right, let's talk about some of the other characters they introduced to us. First was Callisto, who
Hmm.
was along with Magneto, played by Danaya Ramirez, if I pronounced that correctly. The character of Callisto first appeared in the Uncanny X-Men number 169 in May of 1983. In the movie, she is the leader of the group called the Omegas. They all had a little Omega tattoo on
Hmm.
them. But in the comics, she's the leader of a group called the Morlocks. And so I don't know why they didn't just use the name Morlocks. I don't know if Omega sounded cooler, if it was because Omega meant the end and
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like somebody trying to be clever.
yeah, but her powers. So in the comics, Callisto, her powers are really just that all of her senses are enhanced, and it makes her just a really good fighter. It's nothing any special. And so in the movie, they give her the power to detect other mutants and their powers, which
Right,
actually
right.
belongs to a character called Caliban, who we saw in Logan primarily,
Right, right.
Stephen Merchant's character. So they kind of merged the characters there. But what were your thoughts on Callisto?
I mean, she was fine. I mean,
Yeah,
nothing stood out, one way or the other.
I feel like that's going to come
Um,
across a lot in this episode.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
fine. She had two kind of lieutenants, I guess you would say, beside
Hmm.
her. One was, I didn't even honestly figure this out until I looked it up later. One of them was supposed to be Psylocke.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one was supposed to be Psylocke, played by Mei Ling Melicon.
Okay.
And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to talk about this Psylocke because you didn't see any of the Psy power that Psylocke
Hmm.
has. I would rather wait until we cover X-Men Apocalypse when Olivia Munn played a more true version of
Right,
Psylocke,
right, right.
because this Psylocke was not even close to the actual Psylocke. So moving on. Her other right-hand man was played by Ken Leung, and the character is credited as Kid Omega. Now, there's an issue with that.
That sounds made up.
Well,
Go
it
ahead.
is not. So, Kid Omega is in the comics. Kid Omega first appeared in New X-Men number 134 in January of 2003. So, just a few
Okay,
years
so
before
fairly
this.
new. Gotcha.
But Kid Omega's powers are psychic. He's telekinetic.
Okay.
He's a very powerful psychic. The character in the movie, produces the spikes out of his face and
Yeah, like
body
a
and all that,
porcupine. Yeah.
which is a whole different character. That is Quill.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
Quill, who appeared in New X-Men number 1 in July of 2004. And for those of you who just followed that, let me explain. So, New X-Men 134 was in 2003. New X-Men number 1 was in 2004. This is when they do the volume change. So,
Gotcha.
yeah. So, Kid Omega was appearing in New X-Men Volume 1. And then when they kind of rebooted things and switched over, New X-Men number 1 was Volume 2. And that was in July of 2004. So, again, his powers more represent Quill. The problem there is Quill's an X-Man. Quill's not a villain. To my knowledge, Quill has never been a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Quill is an X-Man. Now, if you watch the movie with the commentary on, it is stated that them crediting him as, because he's never named in the movie,
Right.
with them crediting him as Kid Omega, that was a mistake. And according to I don't know who says it, whether it's the writer or whether it's Brett Ratner, but one of them says he's supposed to be Quill.
Gotcha.
I again chalk this up to Brett Ratner not knowing anything about X-Men and him flipping through the encyclopedia. And he got some stuff messed up.
He probably just saw a name like, ooh, that's a cool name. Just call him that.
Yeah. Speaking of, randomly grabbing somebody out of an X-Men encyclopedia, let's talk about Multiple Man. So they make Multiple Man kind of a big deal in this movie, where in the comics, he's not even that big of a deal. But Multiple Man, played by Eric Dane, Multiple Man from the comics, appeared in Giant Size Fantastic Four, number 4. I didn't actually put a date for that one, but who cares? This is another kind of like Quill. Multiple Man's, for the most part in the comics, he's a good guy. So making him this horrible villain that's locked up with Mystique and Juggernaut, I didn't quite understand. He has been a villain in the comics. He was a villain in the Ultimate Marvel stories. Now, in the comic, his duplicates, which he calls dupes, are created through kinetic energy.
Okay.
So, like, for instance, if you run into him, a duplicate will pop out.
Oh, I got you.
Or a couple of duplicates will pop out, which help me out here, because I tried to think about, did we not see a kid with that ability in one of these X-Men movies? Like, a kid got knocked over in the hallway and he splits into a bunch of versions of himself.
I remember that. That might have been in the second one, I think.
Maybe. I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it. But as soon as I was thinking about it, I was like, no, we've seen a kid with those powers before.
It was weird going back and watching this one. I kept thinking, oh, is this scene, like, I kept wanting to put X2 scenes in this movie. And somehow in my mind, the two have gotten some interchange, which plot-wise doesn't make any sense. But like, just maybe I think it's just different characters or like specific, like little small scenes. Probably more so like in the school, and that's probably why.
Well, yeah, and that's because we get, and this is no disrespect to Elliot Page, but at the time her name was Ellen Page, or his name was Ellen Page. So I'll probably say Ellen Page. Ellen Page playing Kitty Pryde. We had already seen a Shadowcat as one of the students in, I think it was X2, but it wasn't Ellen Page.
Right.
It was some random actress. I don't even think she was given a name, because we see her. We also see Jubilee. And that's the thing that ticks me off the most. Jubilee is played by Kia Wong, and Kia Wong has played Jubilee in all 3 of these movies, but she's never been given a role other than just a background character.
It's crazy.
And I don't understand why they never just used her. Just use her for something. But let me just go through a list of some other just random characters you kind of see.
Yeah, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
So, and again, these are ones that you see them kind of for the first time. You see Siren, you see Arclight, you see the Stepford Cuckoos, You see Fat, which I did kind of like that one. He's the big guy when they're meeting, and he goes to sit down and they're worried, and then all of a sudden he becomes skinny. That was a pretty cool special effect. I ain't gonna lie about that.
Yep.
Then we got Spike. That was the one who was chasing Wolverine in the woods. Glob Herman, Anoli, Avalanche, and Vanisher. Those, again, Brett Ratner was given an X-Men encyclopedia, and it sounds like he just flipped through the page, stuck his finger in, and said, okay, let's put this character somewhere in there. All right, so with all these characters, and with all of this, like I said, I just wanted to hit a few because there's so many. Tim and I are going to just talk about who did we think were our best and worst characters out of the movie. So I'll let you, Tim, go first. Let's start with best character. Who was your best character in this movie? Who did you think was the best version, did the best, whatever?
Oh,
who was your best character?
Well, now I got to change my answer.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Who was your best character?
I mean, I'm always going to go with Wolverine. He's the character that I care the most about in any of the X-Men movies. even though he's still somewhat of a wasted character in this one, because X2 was so much of his story. He was really the central character. Same with Days of Future Past, which is probably why those were my two favorite X-Men movies.
Wait,
but he's still
Logan is not one of your favorite X-Men movies?
No. Let's not have that discussion right now.
Tim.
I'm not a fan of Logan like other people are. But it's good. It's just let's not have that discussion. I think Chad and I had that discussion when we did our episode without you, so you should have been there. But anyway, as far as least favorite, and we've already covered it, as well, I was like, don't start with him because that's who I'm going to talk about. But Angel was probably my least favorite, only because he was so underused. And like I said, with using the actor Ben Foster, knowing what he can do as an actor, and him being completely wasted. And I'm not saying he's the only one that's wasted, because there's a lot of wasted, actors in this movie that can do way better than what they were given. I won't even get started with. Yeah, I'm not even going to go down that road. But anyway, but yeah, Angel was the one that I was the most disappointed in. And I remember feeling that way, seeing it for the first time in the theater, like when they had that opening scene with the kid. I was like, ooh, this is going to be interesting to see where this goes. Mm-hmm. And then it goes nowhere, and the movie was over. And I was like, really? Used him for that? That was his whole arc, was just to, fly, save his dad at the end? Okay, so yeah, those are mine. What about you?
Well, so I'm going to go back to your best again. I honestly think that of all of the movies that Hugh Jackman has appeared as Wolverine, I think this is his worst performance.
Yeah, I could see that.
Even his short cameo in First Class, where he just says 2 words,
right?
I think is a better performance. Did you not, like, if you watch Hugh Jackman, did it not look to you like he was just like he didn't want to be there for a lot of the scenes?
Yeah.
That's my thing. So no, for me, and we've already talked about him, my best character is Beast.
Yeah,
I think he was perfectly done. He was perfectly acted. He was perfectly portrayed. We've already talked about it all, but yeah, to me, that was the best character. The worst character for me, Rogue.
Yeah, she's a very close second, but she's my least favorite in all of them because she whines the whole time. I am not. It grinds my nerves. She grinds my nerves. Every time she was on screen, I was just like, where's my phone? So I don't have to look at her.
Mm-hmm. And again, nothing against Anna Paquin.
No. It's just a character she's been given.
Yeah. Oscar winner, Anna Paquin.
Right. Oh, yeah. Emmy winner.
But And again, it's in the writing. They screwed Rogue up from the very first movie. Mm-hmm. It was not the character that comic book fans, enjoyed and wanted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they made her so emo, and it didn't work. I didn't like it, and especially didn't like it in this movie. So, that's it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I had to whittle it down, but there were many honorable mentions in that category for least favorite.
Well, there's so many characters that you can't help but have a whole list of. I don't like this character. I don't want this character in it.
But once again, we kind of said I don't think it's the fault of the actors. It was the writing and what they were given. It's the problem with, and this is the problem. And I know we're not talking about this movie right now, but Apocalypse was not done very well. Of course, Dark Phoenix is horrendous. I haven't even watched the New Mutants, which I knew you mentioned you're going to be doing here pretty soon. But when you have so many characters, you don't give us enough time to. There's no development, and there's not enough for us to care about them enough.
That's definitely true.
That's evident in this movie, where it's trying to move from action scene to action scene without much story to link it all together well. Which happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this guy under the bus. You said that you said it's not the actor's fault. Aaron Stanford, Pyro, the guy who plays Pyro.
That was number 3. That was number 3 on my list. But I didn't like him in the second one.
Yeah, it wasn't the writing for him. He overacted.
Yeah.
He made his character, I will say, he works as a villain because every time I saw him on screen, I wanted to punch him in the face.
Right.
But yeah, that acting was not good on his part. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Is the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast.
All right, so let's get into the moving panel section. And of course, we can't help but, obviously talk about the connection to the Dark Phoenix saga.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people may not actually be aware of this. The Dark Phoenix saga is not a storyline.
Okay.
It's a development of a character. It takes if you call it a story, the entire Dark Phoenix story actually takes place over a couple of years.
Okay.
Or at least the initial story. And Phoenix comes back later. But when Jean Grey first becomes the Phoenix, she's actually a good guy for a good while.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes the Dark Phoenix. And then we go from there. So let's kind of get into this though. So the Dark Phoenix saga, or the Phoenix saga, whatever you want to call it, is written by Chris Claremont. Now, are you aware that Chris Claremont actually has a cameo in this movie?
I think so.
Do you know who he was?
He's the lawnmower guy, right?
Yeah, he's the lawnmower guy.
Stan Lee is the garden hose man,
yes,
and he's the lawnmower man.
Yeah, which is how they're credited in the in the credits.
Right.
I love that he's lawnmower man.
Not to get confused with the movie character, the lawnmower man.
Yes,
but
yeah, Chris Claremont, who pretty much gave us the X-Men that we know and love. Obviously, Stan Lee gave us the original group, but if you became a comic book fan in the 80s and 90s, like Tim and I did, you watched the X-Men cartoon, and those characters, that was Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont's behind all of that. So this was right at his time. So it all started in Uncanny X-Men number 100 in August of 1976. This is where Jean guides the jet through space. It's space in the movie. Obviously, you remember the end of X2. It's this lake, and they got to get out of the lake. But she's guiding it through space. She is hit by a flare in space, and that's really when the story originally came. That was it. It was a flare. Later, it was retconned. There was a alien kind of force inside of it that entered Jean, but this was not. It was just a flare. It was just something that, as the movie more implies, it was another part of Jean's power that, awoken.
Right.
So then, just like in this movie, in the next issue, 101, in October of 1976, Jean emerges from the water. So very similar to the way we saw it in the movie. I do think I would have liked to have seen her fly out of the water. I was kind of a little bummed that you just see kind of the water explode and then it's just foggy and all of a sudden she's there. But that's when it happens. She emerges, and of course she doesn't kill Cyclops in the comic, obviously. But this plays out pretty much the same. She passes out. They find her, and because they're with her at the time because they're still in the plane, and they take her to the hospital. So plays out very similar. When Storm and Logan find her, they don't take her to the hospital, but they take her back to the mansion. Now, the next several comics, we kind of get a panel or two about her recovering in the hospital, but the X-Men just move on with another mission. So we get to see a little bit. They battle Juggernaut at this time, so hey, we can say that's a connection. We also, in one of the issues here, we get to meet Corsair, which is Cyclops' dad.
Okay.
That's when he's first introduced. So kind of some interesting things happen. Now, in issue 105, we're now in June of 1977. So almost a full year since Jean has become the Phoenix. We have the X-Men facing off against a character called Firelord, who is one of Galactus's heralds, kind of like the Silver Surfer. They're facing him, and then Jean unlocks her Phoenix powers at this time. So we get to see her pretty much completely decimate this guy who has all this cosmic power. Jump even further ahead to issue 133 from May of 1980. So now we're almost 4 years after she has become Phoenix. Jean, in that comic, Jean actually uses her, this is another connection with the movie, Jean uses her powers to hold back Scott's lasers, his beams, so that she can see his eyes.
Okay.
So, hey, look at that. We
saw
another
that
thing straight out of the comic. It is also in this issue that the X-Men team up with Beast. Beast actually wasn't an X-Men at the time in the comics. Beast was actually an Avenger.
Very cool.
But he shows up and works with them in this. So we got the little Beast tie in there. Jump ahead a couple more months to issue 136 of August 1980. And Jean has become the Dark Phoenix. She is the villain now. And as the Dark Phoenix, she has destroyed a planet. All life and everybody on the planet. She blows it up. She then returns to Earth, and now going back to connection with the movie, she goes to her childhood home. Now, of course, difference here is her parents are actually still alive, and they're still there.
Okay.
And they actually talk to her and confront her, but it's still kind of a very similar moment. She's wrestling with who she is. She's wrestling with the love she has for her family. Like I said, her parents are still there. Her sister's actually there too. But then because she's the Phoenix, she's so powerful, she can't help but read their minds. And deep down, she even makes a comment like they're probably not even aware that they think this or they feel this, but she can read in their minds that they actually are afraid of her.
Okay.
Which of course, kind of leads to her snapping and all. But also when she's at one point in this issue, she actually begs Wolverine to kill her. So again, hey, they use the comic as a source pretty well. The story wraps up in the next issue, 137 from September of 1980. Jean has to face, and again, Jean's kind of won over. She's pushed the Phoenix down. So she has to face a tribunal for her crime of, killing a planet.
Right.
Unfortunately, things go wrong. Phoenix comes back out. Now in this one, Wolverine and Colossus actually do the fastball special like they do at the end of the movie. The only difference here is that because of the gravity on the planet, Wolverine actually says, "I'll throw you," and Wolverine throws Colossus.
Okay.
It does not work. Jean catches Colossus and just kind of throws him down. But at the end of this whole Phoenix story, which like I said, has taken 4 years. We're now in September of 1980. She first really became Phoenix in August of 1976. So we're talking 4 years later. They wrap up the original Phoenix saga, and Jean sacrifices herself. Now, that is her doing. There's no one who kills her. She does something to save everybody, and in the process, she perishes. And they really did that. Like, Jean Grey was dead in the comics for a long time. What did you know about the Phoenix saga prior to this?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing? You didn't see it when they did it in the cartoon back in the 90s?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, my first introduction to the X-Men was the movies. And so, but I had a good friend of mine he was a big fan of like Fantastic Four, X-Men. So he's the one that kind of got me wanting to see the movie. So that's which is probably why I enjoyed the movie a lot more seeing it the first time than a lot of other people, like people that knew the comics probably did. Like rewatching it for this, it doesn't hold up as well as it did back then.
Yeah.
Probably because they've done better stories since then.
Not of the Phoenix Saga, they haven't.
No. I'm just saying, just X-Men stories in general. Well, they did a few better. Like First Class was much better. Like I said, Days of Future Past was one of my favorites.
Okay.
After that, it was pretty horrible.
So I probably should have asked you this before I broke down the story, but what was your impression on the actual story they tell about Jean becoming the Phoenix?
It was interesting, because I didn't really know the story ahead of time. I thought it was an interesting concept, and really at the time didn't think it was done that poorly, only because I didn't know the source material like other people did. So it was an interesting concept, an interesting idea that I could get behind. But like you mentioned at the beginning, having that as well as the Cure child storyline didn't seem to mesh well together. So it seemed like two different movies trying to exist in the same movie that didn't really work as well.
Well, speaking of the Cure, so that's from the comics as well. It's actually from Joss Whedon's run as the writer for a great run. I'm not going to lie. This is a great, if you want to get into X-Men, you don't want to go back to the old X-Men. Astonishing X-Men from 2004, kicked off in November. The first 6 episodes are the Mutant Cure storyline.
Okay.
And it's a Cure created by a company called Benetech. It is the scientist who is barely mentioned in this movie, Dr. Rao, who we do see. She's killed by Quill at the end.
Yeah.
She is the one who develops a cure. It's also, they use a child. Now, it's not Leech in the comics. It's this other little girl whose name is slipping my mind right now. But in the comic, it's a bigger story. The whole concept of the cure came from this alien named Ord, who's becomes the villain for the story. But the Dr. Rao character's the same. In the comic, her and Beast are actually friends. They're both scientists. She actually gives Beast a sample of the cure for him to investigate himself. Because he's a little skeptical about it. He questions it. He learns from it, pretty much learns it works. But he also then discovers that they're experimenting on this little girl. And, that becomes the whole thing. I will say this. Wolverine and Colossus do the fastball special in that storyline too. So hey, look at that. Both storylines, they do the fastball special.
Been around for a while.
But that's how it goes there. Of course, once it's discovered, and there's a whole connection with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury, which of course they couldn't do in the movies because they only had rights to the X-Men characters. But again, the connection there. Now, the way they kind of portray the cure in this movie, I think it was good. But I think that it still missed the mark because of, like you just said, they're trying also to do the Dark Phoenix story. And you can't do both of them.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the biggest things that doesn't work about this movie. There's a lot of little things.
Yeah, a lot.
There's a lot of little things. The danger room scene that we see at the beginning, part of me is like, that's the movie I want. I want that movie. Right. Now, they kind of gave it to us in Days of Future Past, but I'm like, that's the movie. We see the Sentinel. And of course, again, every 90s kid who watched the cartoon, hey, Sentinel, excited.
I still want to know how Wolverine lit his cigar in a simulation, but that's for a different discussion.
Look, it's the danger room. They can really get in, it's like real stuff.
Okay.
It's just like the holodeck in Star Trek Next Generation. They really interacted with things that weren't technically there.
Okay.
So, don't. Again, we've said this before. Yeah, we've said this before on episodes. It's like, don't question the logic of a superhero movie.
Right.
Comic book movie.
I'm going to get upset about how a cigar gets lit, but I'm accepting everything else that happens in this movie that would never happen in real life. So it's what we do.
Yeah. And also, going back, we talked about this earlier when we were talking about Rogue. That love triangle storyline. Oh my goodness. That was unneeded, unnecessary, melodramatic.
I feel like this was one of those movies which you explained well at the beginning, with changing directors and people joining projects and leaving projects. It almost became a studio movie in the sense of it was put together by focus groups. Okay, what we need here is we need this, teenage love story to appeal to the kids. And you've got to have this story to appeal to the women and this story to appeal. So it's like you're trying to appeal to all these different classifications and all that kind of stuff.
Demographics,
right. And then you try to please everybody and you please none of them.
Yeah. Well, and that's just like going back to me talking about all the connections with, the 90s comics, and to have Iceman, who's been in all 3 movies, to have Iceman finally go full Iceman at the end of this, in his fight with Pyro, that's something that you would almost feel like in a movie nowadays, that would have been written in a way that as soon as he turned into the full Iceman, would have gotten a cheer.
Right.
But when he does it in this movie, you just kind of go,
yeah,
okay.
It happened because it needed to happen, not because
and
it was a organic evolving of the character.
And nothing's going to come of it either.
No.
Nothing's going to come up. Because there was one scene, I'm trying to remember who he was with. He's with somebody who's like flying him down. And I'm like, dude, Iceman should be able to create like a ice slide that he he can come in on. Like, he shouldn't be being carried by somebody.
Was it Storm that was
carrying him? I think it was. Storm. All right. Well,
another wasted character, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, we're getting into this. So let's get into, just like we did with the characters, let's get into our favorite scene and a scene that we just think didn't work. So let's start off with the favorite scene. So what was your favorite scene?
I kind of have 2, and neither one of them are they're not. There was no fantastic, iconic scene for me in this, but 2 scenes that I like. The first is the Mystique interrogation scene, and I think because I've liked Mystique's character, I was upset that she wasn't more a part of this movie. But I like the interrogation scene for whatever reason. Just, I guess her changing forms and stuff was always cool to me when I watched these movies. But it was just a cool scene. It just, I can't give a whole lot of explanation besides I like Mystique, and so that scene was fun. It was better than in the truck, when she's changing forms and the guard is messing with the guard. Like, that scene was kind of, I think, done more for laughs than it was for the plot. But I like that scene, and I liked, as far as just an action scene, I liked the scene with Wolverine, the fight in the woods. That scene was pretty cool. So just for pure action purposes, I enjoyed that scene.
Yeah, you actually you took mine there. Mine was also the Wolverine in the woods, which I heard they added Spike into that because apparently the way it was originally done and shot, it really just looked like Wolverine just went berserk and just started murdering all.
I could see
all these people, and so they added in the Spike part, so at least there was someone who initiated it. But still, I can
see that.
Love it. I mean, that's one of the. Yeah. I mean, I know this was years before, but you go to Logan, right there at the end when he's running through the woods, just
it's a great visual.
Yeah, having him do that is a great moment. Yeah. So yeah,
and I would have liked to see more of Spike too, because I thought he was a cool character to have. And once again, he's just there as a foe for Wolverine to defeat in a scene
with no dialogue whatsoever.
Right.
But now, quick little favorite moment, and this is probably cheesy because it is kind of a cheesy scene, but I actually just love the visual of it, and that's Kitty being chased by Juggernaut, and Kitty running through the walls, and then him just crashing through them. I enjoyed that. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah. I enjoyed it. But so what scene for you didn't work, or what?
Every other scene in the movie.
But I mean, is there anything particular that you just You know, like I talked about the like if I know I talked about kind of a story, but the love scene, not the love scene, but the love triangle.
Right.
If I were to go to say a specific scene for me, it is when Iceman and Kitty ice skate.
Yeah.
Like
when I was talking about the focus group, that is a scene specifically I felt was added in because it was trying to appeal to a certain audience.
Yeah, because
not because it was anything for the story.
Yeah, the movie just comes to a halt for those few minutes. So are there any other scenes for you like that are just like, why?
Yeah, there's just not one that stands. It's a lot of little moments instead of, like I said, the whole Magneto stopping the trucks scene. I remember that being cool when I was younger, like seeing it originally. It looked really cheesy now, and of course, I know special effects have gotten better. But that scene just it feels weird now. I don't know how to best way to explain it. It just doesn't it was all for spectacle. You know, he could have done that a completely different way to achieve what he wanted to achieve, and then he gets to it's like he gets there to save her, and then she gets hit with the cure darts, and he just like, I have no use for you now. You're one of them, and then walks away. It's like, dude, she's been with you for how long, and all of a sudden, because she's looks human, you just give up on her. That scene has always, I guess I had that one scene, that scene has always bothered me, and I know it was because she got taken out early because she was involved with she had other projects she was supposed to be doing at the same time, so they kind of had to write her out of the script as well. So it's kind of a easy way to get her out at the beginning of the movie. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of that.
Talking about unnecessary use of your powers, Magneto also moving the Golden Gate Bridge. Why? And I also don't understand, why did you connect it? Like, all of your people were on the bridge. You connecting it just allows the X-Men and everybody else to get there. The military that fought against you, allowed all of them to get there. Here was my other thing. When the military show up, and of course they have plastic guns, and Magneto's going, oh no, let's disregard all this other metal that is around us. I am powerless now because they have plastic weapons.
Right, I can't take away their weapons, so now I'm powerless.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's ignore the the sheets of metal that he does pick up later to block the shots, and let's ignore the vehicles that are all sitting around, that he could clearly pick up. I do want to go back. You talked about the interrogation scene. There's another wasted actor, Anthony Held, that played the interrogator.
Oh yeah.
I mean, dude is Chilton from Silence of the Lambs.
Right, exactly.
He's a great character actor. I remember him being in Boston Legal, lots of other things. Great character actor. And he's just completely ruined to this little bit part. Another, why? And I'm honestly, when I looked him up, because I wanted to make sure I got his name, and I see the poster for X-Men The Last Stand. You got Wolverine front and center. You got Storm right behind him. And then Angel is the next predominant person. I mean, even Jean is just
way in the
back between Storm and Wolverine's shoulders. You just see her head. But so much.
Good old marketing.
So much. All right. Well, that gets us into, obviously, our final decision. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. So go ahead. You know what? This is a toss-up. I really don't know where you might fall here. So go ahead, Tim. Bag it, stack it, or trade it.
I'm gonna stack it. It's a borderline between stack it and trade it, because there are other X-Men movies that I like more. X2, Days of Future Past would definitely be higher on my list. But it's not. It does have some good moments, and it's not. I don't think it. Once again, I will say it's not as terrible as a lot of people say it is. Yes, it's flawed. Yes, it could have been done a lot better. But let's look at the time it being made before the huge comic book movie,
Boom.
boom, and universe that we live in now, where this pales in comparison to what they're doing now. It still was trying to do something that no one had tackled before, and that was the Dark Phoenix story. They didn't get it right, but they did try. So for that reason, I'll stack it.
I'm in that same boat. This is a stack it for me. Like you said, this is not a Dark Phoenix movie. They do not tell that story the way they should. And even though we're not talking about that movie, they didn't do it right the next time they tried to tell it.
Even worse.
This is barely a mutant cure story. I think if they had just focused on the mutant cure, it could have been a better movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Ignored the whole Phoenix stuff. I think it could have been better. I think there's a lot more to it going that route.
Because honestly, I was drawn more to the Cure story.
Yeah, it's more interesting. It's more interesting than the Phoenix story.
Yeah.
As we've talked, there's too many characters. There's too many side stories. Again, the love triangle, I didn't care at all.
Still don't.
Yeah, didn't care. Like you were just saying with Mystique, I didn't care. Even when you have a Sentinel show up in the danger room at the beginning, then you have a character named Trask, who is the guy who's supposed to create the Sentinels. Right. You have him. I just was like, okay, but he's just there. Like, there's nothing. You even have this great thing you could have gone off with Beast being this, ambassador and secretary of mutant affairs.
Yeah.
And the president, his turn all of a sudden to go against the mutants just did not make sense.
We do this before, we're going to do it again. This is the next Disney Plus show they need. Beast needs his own Disney Plus show with that, what it is, as him as
making a political,
the secretary of, making a political drama. Man, that would be so good.
That would be pretty good.
Disney Plus, we got the next hit for you. Just send us the check and we'll put our name on it. That's all we got.
Just name us as producers. I don't even want any money. Just put my name on as producer.
I just want to see my name in the credits. It's story by, inspired by. It's fine with me.
But that was actually something I was going to go to. If they want to do the Phoenix saga, it needs to be a miniseries. It does not need to be a single movie.
I mean, just, you said it took them years to do it in the comics. Why would they be able to do it in a hour and 45-minute movie and do it justice? Yeah, a series is where that story needs to be, for sure.
Agreed. All right. Well, that was The Last Stand, and we are making our last stand. Now that's a movie to talk about. You know what? We got other X-Men movie to talk about, and like Tim kind of says, they don't necessarily get any better. So it'll be interesting when we get to talk about the next one. But thank you, Tim. Tell us a little bit about the 80s Flick Flashback and episodes you got coming up.
So we've already released our season premiere, which was The Thing, which Ron West and I discussed. I know Laramy wanted to be on that episode. I couldn't fit two on this one, but it's a great episode. Make sure you check it out if you haven't listened to it already. And then I've got Better Off Dead coming up quickly behind that with Nicholas Pepin from Pop Culture Roulette, which I think is going to be on Laramy's moving panels.
Yeah, we're talking about an episode. We're just getting it planned out. That might be coming in the next month or so.
Yep. So I got some cool stuff coming up, and I'm really excited. Going to do something big in April. There are 3 release dates in April. And I'm pulling from Laramy and Moving Panels and doing like a big panel, not the same kind of panels, but a panel discussion. And we're going to tackle the Back to the Future trilogy in the month of April. So I'm really excited about that. Of course, Laramy's going to be a part of that one. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the full trilogy and not just one movie at a time. So we're just going to tackle the whole thing all at one time. So be sure to check us out.
Very exciting, and I'm definitely excited about the Thing episode. I'm a huge fan of the Thing. I played the video game. I love the Thing. So, check those out. Again, check out our other partner podcasts, like you mentioned, the Pop Culture Roulette. Check them all out. hit us up on social media, rate us and review us, and we do this show for you. And so let us know what you like, and we appreciate everything that you have. But for today, I want to thank Tim, and for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Good night, everybody.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
What's up, dudes? I'm Jerry D of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, books, fashion, and fads.
If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, he's got it covered. Wait, is there a lot of things to talk about for the 80s and Christmas?
Well, you got the movie giants like Christmas Vacation, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. There are TV specials like Muppet Family Christmas, Claymation Christmas Celebration, and a Garfield Christmas special.
Plus classics shown every year.
You also jam out to Last Christmas, Do They Know It's Christmas, and Christmas in Hollis. But most of all, it was a time for the most bodacious, best-selling Christmas toys ever, like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers,
and Cabbage Patch Kids.
Yes, them too. We cover them all, plus much more, including standard segments like Hap Hap Happiest Memory, Gag Me with the Spoon, The Other Half of the Battle,
and Chant with the Littles.
So tune in to Totally Rad Christmas everywhere you get your podcasts. Turn the clock back and dive into those warm and fuzzy memories.
Later, dudes.